So the purpose of this video is to take my 30 plus years of experience in the disaster planning industry. This is a little different than what I teach as far as when I'm teaching commercial and corporate businesses how to prepare prior to a disaster. So 30 plus years, 14,000 plus projects, responded to most wide area disasters, both nationally and internationally. Everything from critical infrastructure, hospitals, airports, hotels, logistics centers, municipalities, shipping ports. Those plans were made specifically to assist people in how to prepare prior to a disaster, bring in the necessary fuel, power, get those critical infrastructures, keep them online or get them back online. A lot of times we have warnings for those type of scenarios. We have the warnings of a hurricane approaching or some seismic movement. Not a lot of time. Other times we have tornado warnings. They may come in. Wildfires that may be approaching. But some things we don't have preparedness plans for is if there was a cyber attack, if there is a sleeper cell software that affects an entire system or takes an electrical grid down. And in those type of scenarios, a lot of the plans that are out there are extremely elementary. They're really basic. Because what I find is many times when people get into this planning type scenario, they find out how overwhelming it is, and then they just find it to be overwhelming and overburdensome, so they just actually stop the planning process. Do a temperature check on how you operate in a fog of war. Think calmly and clearly, stay grounded, as you are no good if you're frozen in fear and in complete panic. You serve nobody. Most people start to review the gaps and then get overwhelmed and simply choose to avoid the planning process. You know, the beautiful thing about being in the disaster planning industry is I get to look at a lot of different plans made by a lot of different so-called experts. And many times these plans are simply meant to check a box. They're meant to appease the risk management or insurance. And you know, the crazy thing about it, it's like the architect that never built a house. Those plans fail miserably. I look at the gaps because in the real world, my team responds to these areas and I see plans that are like, those plans were useless. You know, it's like the battalion chief that shows up at a structure fire and the property manager runs out there, hands in the binder and says, here's our disaster plan. And the fire captain grabs it, throws it down up against the doorstop to hold the door and says, get out of my way, I'm here to put out a fire. So for me, when I'm putting plans together and I talk about disaster plans, I look at it in a real world scenario. Is it gonna work or is it not gonna work? So I'm taking all that education, I'm bringing it to the forefront so you can actually be better prepared to take care of your families. Why do I do it? Because I've always spent my life about being in service, about being outward focused, about seeing where the failures are and bringing solutions to those failures. And in this world that I see that how it's constantly evolving and all the shit that's coming our way, I'm like, here's the best possible plans I could put together to keep my family safe. So the way I'm sharing it is what I'm doing for those people that I love, and also making sure the first responders on my team have a good plan in place for their families, because when we get punched out, I can't think about where they're at. I just need to know that they've taken care of their family and their mechanics, and they're ready to respond for our clients and the critical infrastructure needs, that we can be outward focused, engaged, and ready to go. Hit the ground running and just handle our situation and their situation at the same time. So here's what a lot of people don't know. What a lot of people don't know is in the United States, you have 18 critical infrastructures. 17 of those critical infrastructures run off the electrical grid. The electrical grid goes down for 1 year. The top scientists in the disaster and risk management side of the industry predict that 90% of Americans will be dead. The seconds of when the electrical grid goes down, here's the things that start to fail. Those with pacemakers will drop immediately. And the patients on life support, dialysis, and other medical devices needed to survive will die off as the hospitals and pharmacies get raided for life-sustaining drugs. Anything from heart to insulin medication. Everything from supply chain issues to getting fuel and every logistical thing into an area. If the truckers can't get the product within time to your area, there will be a run on the food. 90% of our food in most major areas that is consumed is grown more than 100 miles away. Keep that in mind. Grocery stores carry about 3 days worth of food. You're 9 meals away from complete and total anarchy. The part that most people don't pay attention to is, oh, the electrical grid goes down. Why would it be down for a year? It's very unlikely, But the problem is that with the chip shortages and the supply chain issues, parts are coming from South Korea, majority of the parts, for those electrical grid systems, which means those parts are not available for up to 2 years. You know what that means? Do the calculations. This is a very serious matter. And if you don't do the planning now, when you have the time, when the lights go out, you're gonna have a lot of time on your hands, but it'll be complete chaos. You have 4 hours typically in those type of scenarios to have a plan to execute. You don't have 4 hours to figure out where your family's at. You got 4 hours to figure out how to get whatever you need of your basic life-sustaining necessities and supplies you need to have in place, where every team member is then assigned to their task and basically goes into the response mode before there's complete and total anarchy. Here's the problem that we run into all the time. When we're doing corporate plans, the individuals that are supposed to respond to the business, the critical infrastructure, the hospitals, and everything else that's going on, airports, they're not showing up because they have an area called the circle of concern. It's, where is my family? Where are your kids? Where's your wife? When all your comms go down, what's it gonna look like? Does your kid know what the evacuation route is? Is your kid in school? Does he know the route to walk home? Is your car or vehicle EMP proof? Are you gonna be able to make it to intercept your kid or pick up your kid? Do you know where everybody's at all times? So it's not enough just to have a satellite phone, a bivy stick, to be able to use your GPS locations and so on and so forth. It's making sure that that piece of equipment is actually usable, that you have it properly charged, and that it's in a Faraday bag. What do? Every 3 months, we do a simple drill. We pull them out of our bags, gives us a reminder to charge the phones, charge the sticks, make sure everything's working, and then do a call tree call, right? Aside from that, we also do a plan that has no comms whatsoever, no sat, no bivy stick, no nothing. And that plan is a simple paper plan. It's a check-in point, where their board is, what is being written, what is the messaging, and how everyone is checking in at any given time. I personally don't agree with community first. What I believe is family first, individually first. Where are you? Where are you operating from? How would you be operating in a fog of war? Are you the person that your family is going to count on, your community is going to count on when that situation happens? Where are you at spiritually? Where are you at emotionally? Where are you at physically? And who are your resource partners that are going to be part of your plan? When it comes time to create a group plan, you want to pick the individuals that are going to be the people that you know are going to respond effectively in those type of scenarios. And have redundancy put in place, because for any reason that person doesn't show up, you have to have plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E. I mean, let's just call it like it is. That person that you may need to count on for that particular thing may not be there at that time. But choose the individuals that are proper for it. Grab the experts and the non-experts, because a lot of times when it comes into that scenario, people have to understand that it's all hands on deck. You may be called to be that first responder, but also find out the people that are applying themselves to this plan that actually truly are committed to making sure that they're going to show up for you and your community in a time of need. And you know who not to pick. It's just as important as to who to pick. There are no heroes in these type of scenarios. You got to find the people that are actually going to be the people you can truly count on. When involving subject matter experts, you're looking for people with communications, hazardous materials, radiation exposure, and mass care experience behind them. When you're putting your community group together, you may want to see what your local disaster plans are in your community. You may want to look at what the state disaster plans look like, and you may want to know what the federal response is going to be like coming into your space. Because if you understand how everyone's putting the process together, what you may find out in the process is where the gaps are. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't understand is, I'll give you a perfect example. This goes back to 1994, the Northridge earthquake. The entire LA County Fire Department was tapped out in 7 seconds. After 7 seconds, they couldn't answer any more phone calls. The fire department's protocol was to leave the stations in their engines, survey a certain pre-routed map, don't stop for anybody, injuries, whatever, house fires, don't stop for anything or anybody, and then come back to the station and report the findings to the battalion chief. When we get into evacuation plans, one of the things you can do is you can actually download onto your phone under maps.me that gives you kind of a GPS, so that if you're offline and your phone's still working, you're able to navigate through any particular area. You want to establish evacuation routes, and in those evacuation routes, you want to look to stay off any main highway if you can, because those are the areas that typically are the ones that get gridlocked. Cars will be stalled out, and then there'll be military and other people moving through those areas if they can. But it's typically not the safest areas to move through, especially if there's a total, complete meltdown of society. Another thing to keep in mind on these evacuation routes is you want to make sure you know where all the chemical plants are, where there's potential fuel storage, nuclear storage, other areas that actually may have an impact on your route. If it's an earthquake or if it's an attack on the grid. These hazardous material locations are already identified, and you can find them through your local and or state Office of Emergency Management or Office of Emergency Services, depending on how the acronym works for your state. This is not a prepper video. This is not a prepper video in the sense of here's how many canned goods you have, dry goods, freeze-dried goods. This is what you need to do as far as jarring, making jerky. That's not what this video is about. But again, those basic necessities, you should have those things already in place. Obviously power goes out, you want to turn all your faucets on, you want to fill up your sinks, your tubs. You want to basically create as much water storage as humanly possible. You want to also look for local water sources that you could tap into. You want to look at different filtration systems that will work long-term for you to be able to sustain your basic needs, food, water, shelter, warmth, all that type of stuff that comes with the basic planning. That's not what this video is about. When it comes to water, many people don't realize that it is one of the areas that can actually sustain you, but it's also one of the areas that can kill you. When the water's filthy, I find that even when we're doing border ops, a lot of the fatalities that we come across in the desert is from people that actually went to the local stream, the river, drank from it, got parasites inside them, got sick, and they start throwing up and then die from dehydration. So make sure that the water source that you have and that you're going to is clean and that it's drinkable, and if necessary, boil the water. But make sure that you have the proper tools in place to be able to do that. I love the guys that are simply like, you know what? We're just gonna go to booze, guns, and bullets, right? That's my answer to everything. I got lots of ammo. I'm gonna just take care of my shit that way. That doesn't always work. I get security is critical, but if you've actually prepared yourself, people are gonna know when you're catching water in a water basin, your lights are on, you seem to have your place organized, you become a target in an area where people are hungry, starving, and are killing for fuel, food, and resources. So when it comes to security of your personal home, you gotta fortify it like it's an actual shelter, hardened structure, so that someone can't come in and take from you. So obviously preload your weapons, move them around the whole perimeter where you can actually have things staged. You could do simple things as blacking out your windows, pushing furniture up against those areas that are vulnerable, create a panic room where your kids are gonna be at, where they got other materials like coloring books and stuff to keep them preoccupied so they're not wandering out of those areas. You may want to put up a perimeter wall or actually put mortar on top of a perimeter wall with broken glass in it. You may want to run a drone that's got thermal ops on it so you can actually survey your area to see what's approaching your property, work in shifts. Depends on where you're at in a community. You want to maybe set up some barricades, use cars as barricades as well. When it comes to your windows, you can also put a clear armor film on your windows, which many people don't pay attention to. But the clear armor film actually will stop small arms fire, but allow you to fire from inside the premises out the premises. Make sure you reinforce your doors, you get your weapons loaded in place safely around the home, set a perimeter around steps that will create some noise or game trip cameras so that you have an early warning as to what may be approaching your way. Control access points, use cars to block off the street, have street spikes out and ready, stay alert and be prepared to react working in shifts. So we talked about community. We talked about community place of worship, CERT program. I'm also a big believer in the Second Amendment and also creating a group that's going to be your private militia, your private security to protect your premises. So find the local gun club, find the location where the groups are getting together, gun enthusiasts, where they practice, they train, and you could be a part of that because you may need more than just yourself with your gun and some boxes of ammo. Another section I want to talk to you about is important documents. The many things that you have to get in place prior to anything happening, and you should have these important documents regardless of what's happening, both offline and online. Copy your driver license, passport, insurance policies, bank accounts, websites, contacts, family records, and deeds, all backed up on a hard drive, and that hard drive in a Faraday bag. I personally like to print everything out as well with the contacts so that I have all that stuff in place just in case I need to be able to somehow reach those people. I can't get into those drives or I can't get into my computer. When it comes to us responding to our critical infrastructure, for the clients we work for, we push the fuel power generation near the impact zone. In some cases, actually into the impact zone based on the size of the storm to make sure that that critical infrastructure doesn't go down. But if the power goes out, many people don't realize that you're not going to get fuel. Zero. So in every major storm, if you pay attention to it, all the pumps are out. All the pumps are down. And when the pumps come on, sometimes a week later, there's miles of traffic that are in a waiting line to get fuel. If you can actually create a fuel storage tank on your property that you can safely store fuel, 30, 35 gallons, something minimal at least so that you can keep yourself going. Every year when we deploy to hurricanes, we go through an entire deployment checklist. We want to make sure that everybody that's deploying to that area has the proper gears, the proper tools in place, everything from boots to tin snips, to tire repair kits in case you have a flat in the road, to all the different scenarios. So it's all scenarios type planning. But the reality is you can't carry that much gear with you. I mean, it would look ridiculous. What you're really putting together is a kit that's going to be minimal, but that's going to have the most effect in order to get you through any type of disaster. Now, I can't predict the future. I don't know what's coming. Part of your kit obviously is having your medicine. Your first aid kit would obviously include all your BLS type supplies, your first aid supplies, your different medicines, everything from ibuprofen to your antibiotics to whether you're on heart medication, whether you're taking insulin, whatever it may be, you want to have that stuff there ready to go. Many of these things have expiration dates. So that's why in those critical 4 hours that I talk about, you want to make sure that whatever's being grabbed at that time is being taken care of before the total meltdown happens. Personal hygiene is really important. So many people don't realize that infections and disease come from just the basic human necessity of staying clean. If there's insect bites, using antiseptics to make sure that it doesn't get infected. Because an infection in an area when there is no hospitals to go to, there's no medical care available, you want to make sure that you're treating every little scratch as if it's a critical wound. Clean, disinfect, an antibiotic ointment, whatever it may be to prevent any further infection or the possibility for infection. So keep yourself clean. If the water's questionable, don't drink it, don't wash in it. Keep yourself clean, keep yourself neat. Need to take bird baths, whatever it is, keep your clothes, keep yourself clean. Many family members don't think about their furry friends and their furry family members, be it a horse, be it a cat, be it a dog, be it a hamster. So having food so that you have a supply that's ahead of time, not panic buying at the time that something happens. You want to make sure that you have at least a backup storage in place of what that would look like for your furry family members. So we've talked about hydration and water. So let's talk about food. Food and having a long-term sustainable plan is not going to be your freeze-dried food, your heater meals, the power bars you're going to want to eat and live off. It's not going to happen. So you're looking for how you're going to have egg-producing hens, how you're going to actually be able to raise a farm, raise animals, and be able to have, the produce and live off the grid, because that's really what we're doing. If you go back 100 years, you're basically living off the land. And if you live in the city, I always tell people this, because every time we deploy to a disaster area, it's not sustainable. The infrastructure is destroyed. There's no running water. There's no food. The place is devastated. So you have to look at that type of scenario. In a long-term basis, that is not sustainable. So if you live in a major city, you're going to be looking to get out into the rural areas. An area where actually there's farming, where there's animals, you may be vegan. So the produce, where you can grow crops. You're not going to be like, oh, my bug out place is in North Dakota or Canada. Those areas, you're not going to be able to grow crops unless you've created an indoor nursery or greenhouses to be able to sustain growing produce and raising chickens, eggs, whatever it may be that you need in order to survive. So here's something to consider. Everything has a shelf life. Freeze-dried food typically lasts 2 to 5 years. Your cans may last for many years, depending on where you keep them, obviously in a controlled environment. Look for edible foods surrounding your area. 5-gallon buckets, oxygen absorber away from light and heat. You got your typical rice, beans, wheat, garbanzo beans. Learn to can, jar, smoke, and freeze dry in order to preserve when the grid goes down and you don't have refrigeration. I don't do this based on fear. I do this based on the fact that I've done this for a long time. I respond to all the disasters. I am quick on constantly evolving situations. And as this situation is starting to evolve, I've prepped my family to be a little bit more aware, which then creates a sense of calm and a sense of peace. I also am not the person who lives in a state of fear. I simply put the plan together and then I put it aside. We can go down the rabbit hole of disaster planning forever. That doesn't serve. Once you've got the mechanics handled and you put your plan together, take it, set it aside, go back to your normal life. Because if you don't, the mental toll that it's going to take on you is going to be far worse. You're going to be ineffective when a disaster actually occurs. A plan is only as good as those working on the plan, those responding to the plan, and drilling constantly. So every 3 months, my recommendation is run through the plan. Pick it up, set it on your calendar, run through the drill. Pull your phones, make your calls, run through the drill, do a tabletop exercise, do a simulation. Once it's done, put it away, go back to life. Go back to what it used to be. No, you're never going back to what the fuck it used to be. Those days are gone. You know what I mean? Right? I mean, this is the new normal. This is the new normal. This is what we're living with. And it's constantly changing. This is your new normal. Get used to it. Prepare, respond, recover. Those are the 3 things we operate in. We prepare our teams. Then when the time that bell rings, we respond to it. We work through the process and we recover from the back end. But every time we recover to what we call a new normal. That becomes our new normal because it's not what was. This is where we're at. That memory lives in us. The fact is, how do you move forward from there? Because we live in an ever-changing world, I've created a resource page that is constantly being updated. So you watching this video, it's just for today, but the resource page at srp24.com/prepare, you'll find a page of resources that are constantly being updated. This is a place where you can find the latest and greatest technology, also everything from water filters to sat phones to power generation to radiation protection suits, whatever may be coming, including body armor, armor glass for your windows, whatever we know that we've researched, vetted, and tested with our clients in preparing their families and their businesses. So if there's anything I could leave you with, is 3 sectors: prepare, respond, recover. This may be your new normal.